Welcome everyone to the Women in Network Science seminars. Today it's the first Pathways in Network Science talk of this edition. So I will explain a bit what is it. It's a format that started in spring 2022 to provide a platform for accomplished women in network science to share their career journeys. So that's why we are here. And today we have with us Marta Sales Pardo, that she will share with us how went her career and some useful advices, let's say. So first she will present her path in network science, and then at the end there will be some time for questions. Just notice that this talk is recorded, but the questions at the end will not. So it's to provide you a safe space to ask questions without any problems. So Marta, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Elena, for the invitation. Mostly, I think it's a pleasure for me to be talking to young scientists who might or might not, learn something. Learn or at least get some tips or get some idea of what the experiences of other women in network science have been like. So let me start sharing my screen. Okay, let's see if it's not. Yeah. Okay. So here I am. Okay, so this will be, I've taken a look at other sessions. I'm not sure it's going to be very much like the other ones. I hope so. I will tell you a little bit about what I did, why I did it. Unfortunately, because of, limitations of time, it's going to look mostly like a success story. But I have to tell you that there has been a lot of failure in between. So not everything is as good as it might look. But I hope, as I go along, I will try to convey some of these failures and how they have helped me shape my career path. Okay, so why? So I'm going to start to the very beginning. So why did I decide to study physics? And why then did I decide to go into science? So the thing is that when I go now to schools and I talk about to kids and mostly to girls about becoming maybe scientists in the future, all of them know about science. But as a kid, I knew very little about science, actually. I thought this thing, it was made just by crazy people with white overalls or things like this. I was completely clueless, completely clueless about it. But I was very good at math, but I didn't like the abstract thing so much. So I wanted to go into something that was more representative of what I could see in nature, let's say. So also my father was a physicist. Probably this had something to do with why I chose physics, but I chose physics. And this is one thing I'm glad to say that I would choose it again. I really liked it a lot. I enjoyed learning, not all of the subjects, obviously, but many of them. So I studied physics, and by my first year, I decided maybe I wanted to do a PhD, even though until then, I didn't really know that how. What I wanted to do was to work at university and teach. And I sort of asked, so what am I supposed to do to go here? And I said, well, you have to get a PhD. And I said, okay, that's what I will get. So this is what I did. I went to Universitat de Barcelona because that's where I'm originally from. And I studied physics for, during the 4 years that my degree lasted. And on the summer of my junior year, this is my 3rd year, right, as a student, I was contacted by this professor who had taught quantum physics to maybe join his lab. So I got this collaboration fellowship, which is a fellowship that the Spanish government gives to students in their senior year to have this sort of taste of what research looks like. So I said, oh yeah, of course. it's great. This professor asked me to join his lab. I mean, this is going to be awesome. So I did, and I started working on quantum tunneling in organic monocrystals. I know this sounds very odd and very far from network science, but I was actually doing experiments in solid state physics. So there are these crystals that are magnetic. They have this molecular spin, but they have quantized energy levels or quantized magnetization levels. And it has very weird, it displays this kind of like stepping. I mean, I don't know if you can see, no, you cannot see my pointer, but you see that this has some sort of steps. This is the magnetization curve when you increase the magnetic field. So, this is because there is this sort of quantum tunneling of the magnetization. Well, I finished my degree, and and the natural choice was for me to keep doing the same thing. So I asked for this fellowship from this FPU fellowship from the Ministerio, the Spanish Ministerio, and I got it because I had good enough grades for me to get it. And I kept going. But you have to understand, I had studied all the theoretical subjects in my degree. So I wasn't very happy doing experiments. I wasn't happy at all. And that was my first, I guess, clash with reality, in the sense that there were two students of my year, well, we were two, who joined the lab, a guy and myself. And the guy got to the theory because I was apparently not as smart as the guy. So I had to do the experiments. Well, he was very, very smart, but I was just like, whatever, this is getting boring, and I just don't want to do this anymore. So after my first year of PhD, I decided to change. I decided that I don't really like this. I'm not enjoying this, and I'm not here to not enjoy myself. So I have to change this. So I decided to change. I had a fellowship that was awarded to me, and I decided I'm going to do something else. So this was my first lesson, and my first lesson for you. If your heart is not in it, just don't do it. My advice is just don't go through that. Science is hard enough as it is for you to not be enjoying yourself. So I changed subjects. And actually, I went to do something that is also related to magnetism, but I went to statistical physics, and I actually did my PhD on spin glasses. I don't know if you are familiar with this, but these are classic magnetic systems in statistical mechanics. It's a very complicated problem. It's one of the first, I guess, paradigm of complex systems, how such a very simple thing can display such complex and unexplained behavior. So it has many characteristics, like sometimes it looks like a ferromagnet, but some other times it looks like something that doesn't have magnetism. So it was a very exciting problem for a material that's actually pretty useless, because most of the materials that in reality display this behavior don't have really many applications as far as material science goes. But it's a terribly interesting problem to understand, to study, and to and to learn things from. This is one of the things that I like. I learned many, many things while I was doing this. Right, I started studying, so I'm showing here, below, this phase diagram, right? Sometimes, depending on the strength of the interactions and the temperature, magnetic systems can display basically three behaviors: a ferromagnetic one, which aligns with field, but a magnetic one that doesn't care about field, and the spin glass phase, which is this funky phase, very interesting for us. So, okay. So what happens is that this problem is very complicated. And there were very, very smart people working on this. And I had the feeling after 3 years that I wasn't very sure of myself. I wasn't very sure of having learned many things or being very good at it, I was going to conferences and I was understanding just the first 5 minutes of what they were saying. It was pretty awful, right? I had the expectation that, the amount of time I would be able to understand of a talk would increase as my PhD moved forward, and it wasn't happening. And I wasn't understanding what these people were doing. Half of the time it looked like random to me. I was getting very frustrated. So I really was doubting, maybe I'm not cut for this. Maybe, I've put lots of effort in this, but I don't feel that I'm at the same level of understanding that other people are, right? At my same career stage. later on, conversations with other people told me that they were in the same boat that I was, but I just wasn't seeing it myself. Okay, so now, so this is my, at the time, I was like kind of, well, I'm not sure, should I keep doing this? I mean, what should I do, right? But, you know, this, looking back, right? I mean, I don't know if this kind of drawings looks familiar to you, but it became kind of popular about 3 years ago, now that the Nobel Prizes are being announced. Turns out that the Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to 3 people, and one of them was this person, this scientist from Rome called Giorgio Parisi, who actually worked at the beginning in more like quantum field theory, but then he worked on statistical physics and problems in spin glasses. And he found a way to characterize the transition, the theoretical level, the spin glass transition in a very original way that nobody had thought about before. So he actually proposed that there were multiple order parameters as opposed to just one, right? Order parameters are the ones that tell me how this change of behavior happens, when the change of behavior happens as you tune, say, temperature in your system. So looking back, right? I mean, this guy on the right is Giorgio Parisi. I mean, it made me think, oh, maybe, you know, what I was doing wasn't that useless after all. I mean, as I said, I learned lots of things from my period doing this. I wasn't certain of whether I should continue doing this, and actually I decided to change paths. But and I will try to stress this, there are many occasions during my career in which I've used things that I learned during my PhD, still now, which is, I mean, and now it's going to be 21 years since I got my PhD, and still now I do use concepts from it. Actually, I don't know how many of you know Giorgio Parisi or have heard him talk at all. I actually, during my PhD, I went to Rome, to La Sapienza for a while to work with people with his group and everything, and he's an interesting character, to say the least. Okay, so moving on, I mean, it's, well, as I said, when I look back, right, a few years from now, there will be good things to remember, right? And good things to think about your PhD. Even if you are at your PhD now and you're thinking like, this is not working, I tell you, there are things that you've learned that you don't even know that you're going to be using later. So hang on, hang on for later. Okay, so as I said, I decided to change. So no more spin glasses, no more solid state. Actually, what I was very curious about was about a different series of problems. Unfortunately for me, there was this person, this very young professor, who's Luis Amaral, young at the time, not now, who was just starting his position at Northwestern University. And he offered me and my partner a postdoctoral position. We were working on different things at the time. I was doing spin glass, and my partner, who's Virgili, he was working on networks already. But I wanted to go there because I talked to Luis, and he said, oh, so what are you interested in? And I said, oh, I'm interested in anything biology related. I mean, is it neuroscience? Is it the cell? Is it ecology? I don't care. I want to do something about that. I was not very specific about it. I was like, I'm just interested in anything biology. And he said, okay, I think I have room for you in my lab. So why don't you come and join? Why don't the both of you come? And we're like, okay, let's try, let's go. We wanted to find somewhere together, and we didn't even have to fight for it because he offered it to us like right away. He was like, okay, I want the two of you to go. And we said, okay, sounds great, let's go. Let's go to Northwestern. This is close to Chicago, just like very close, like it's like a neighboring city. Okay, so, and what I did, actually, what I started working on was a problem related to what are called DNA microarrays. I don't know how many of you have heard about this, but these are this was the first high throughput technology in biology, in which you would tether some DNA probes in different wells, right, colored differently, and then you would label your sample with two colors, like the control and your real sample, right? and then they would compete to attach to the probes that you had tethered to your wells. And then you would just like apply some sort of like imaging technique, like fluorescent typically, right? And then you would see who had won the competition, right? Whether the control or your sample had won the competition, and then this would give you an idea of whether some genes were overexpressed versus the control or not, or underexpressed, or what have you, okay? So this was for your DNA microarrays. Now people use way less error-prone techniques like RNA-seq, but that's what I was doing. So I was very happy here, like, and actually I was working on the problem of RNA folding. So these are different RNAs, maybe you are familiar with it, like, you know, people talk about the RNA of viruses and how they fold. And then we have COVID coming around. And so I was working on that kind of problem, which is still kind of far from networks. But what happened here? What happened was that I managed to get a Fulbright fellowship, writing a project about this hybridization and modeling hybridization in microarrays. But it was very hard for me to publish anything, okay? So I was there for 1 year, 2 years, and I have lots of results, but we couldn't get it to be accepted in biology journals. Sometimes because we were stepping on somebody else's feet, sometimes because, I mean, we were, I don't know, things were going on and we were not getting the papers accepted. Even only we were getting them accepted, we were sending them to physics journals, but not to biology ones, even though we were like collaborating with biologists and we were like, you know, really working hard to make models that were realistic about how the systems were behaving, but no luck. Worse, even worse, people who had joined with me in the lab with Luis, like my partner, Roger, and another postdoc, were getting their hands full of publications in super nice journals. And I had like nothing, absolute nothing. So I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. I mean, what am I going to do, right? I mean, it's impossible that I'm going to get a position ever if this keeps going this way, right? So that was my way of learning. Again, I guess that this was very tough business, right? And why should I keep doing this? I mean, I'm just doing very honest on what I think it's good science, and nobody's giving me credit for it. I mean, this is terrible, right? And then I also discovered that reviewers can be very mean, opinionated, and partisan. So why do people behave like this? Why is science like this? I mean, isn't supposed to be science like something in which when something is good, it will get accepted? Or is something that if I'm your friend, it's going to get accepted, and if I'm not, it's not going to get accepted. So I was getting very frustrated also with this. And about the unfairness of the reviewing process and the whole like social science process as a whole. And you will see later how I decided to, you know, try to do something, investigate about it. So, well, this happened. I was stuck. I wanted to keep doing science, but I really decided I have to change yet one more time because, I mean, this is not working. So here it comes, networks, which I didn't want to work on networks. I remind you, because this is something that my partner was doing, and I wanted to do something by myself. But then, well, there was this thing about how can we make sense of networks? And mostly the thing that really got me was, how can I apply methods that I learned during my PhD to solve some problems in networks that people who got started working on the network business, like, were coming from other areas and really didn't have the expertise. So this is the first thing that I did. So we realized that, and I'm putting this here, this is a paper with Roger and Luis, and this is the first one that I did in networks. And what we realized, and people were interested in understanding the structure of networks and the modules and blah, blah. And we realized that Michelle Girvan and Mark Newman, they had defined this modularity as a quality metric for how good my division of nodes into groups was. And we found that this modularity was actually kind of biased and could be non-zero even for things that were completely random. And this is a very basic thing to know, I guess now, so now people have already forgotten about it, but it was a very fundamental thing to know at that time. And I was super happy because I could do something that I love, which is do analytical calculations about it, which I hadn't had the chance to do again since my PhD, in which I invested long hours doing analytical calculations. And then here I was like, oh, yeah, I can do something about it. The reviewers were mean, very mean. We sent it to a very, very nice journal. And they said, oh, this is trivial, blah, blah, blah. But now here it is the paper. And now I think it has, lots of citations. No, I know. So see, I mean, sometimes things that are good, even if they are not published in fancy places, they will get the recognition they deserve. Okay, so now, as I said here, going back to reviewers, this is going to be a constant thing in my talk. It's like they can be very mean, but there is nothing you can do about it. So you decide if you want to play the game or not, but you cannot complain. You just have to, get your skin a very thick skin and just decide, okay, so I'm going to try and I'm going to insist and I'm just going to answer or try to, hit every ball that comes my way. So there is an art about like answering to reviewers, about writing letters to editors, about, this and that. But again, you will always encounter people who are just mean. Now, it's important for you to learn how to handle this rejection. You have to understand it is not personal most of the time. It happens to everyone. And this doesn't mean that you're a failure. And most of the time, it doesn't mean that your work is bad. It just means that these two people didn't like it, right? But there's another thing that you have to remember. And it's when you write referee reports, remember not to be mean yourself. Just try to be kind. I mean, if it's a no, it's a no. And you explain why it's not. But don't be aggressive. Don't try to offend in a way the person who is writing the paper, because probably they put a lot of time into it, right? But as I said, I mean, I wish that sometimes reviewers are very nice and they are still saying, they are letting you go. They are still saying they don't like it, but still they are providing you like very constructive criticism about what you could do. And that's what we should strive for, I think. Okay, cool. So here I am. I started working on networks, and then something good happened. Something good happened. And I was worried at the time, right, about how to represent complex systems, how to build what we called maps of complex systems using a network representation, right? Because if you look at this network, you don't know what it is, but I'm going to tell you this is the air transportation network, right? The representations are very different, right? In one, you can see nothing. And in this one, you can see, there seems to be a lot of density inside each set of like geographical units, fewer connections across geographical units, right? Because it's more costly, right? Because there are fewer airline, the transportations go from hub to hub, and typically you cannot go from a small airport to any other airport in the world. You have to go to one of these huge hubs and then jump across geographical units. And the nice thing is that to solve this problem, I actually use concepts that I learned during my spin class PhD, right? And I'm showing you this because, I mean, at the time when I was working on this issue of the 125th anniversary of science came out, and they had these 125 questions of what we don't know. One of the questions was this: how will big pictures emerge from a sea of biological data? And I don't know how to remove this. Well, it doesn't matter. Can I remove it here? Well, it doesn't matter. I don't know if you can see it completely. I don't know how to do it. Sorry, sometimes I feel like a little bit of an idiot because my thing has disappeared. Well, it doesn't matter. You will believe me. You will trust me. So it says, how will big pictures emerge from a sea of biological data, right? That was the time of high throughput technologies in biology. People were amassing enormous quantities of data, but they still know basically the same about biological systems. This is actually a question that is still in vogue now, right? I mean, it's applicable to to not only biology, but other areas of science as well, right? How are we going to make sense of this? I mean, at the time we had zero tools. We had just like, people were basically looking at degrees at most. And now we have a way more developed machinery, but there are still many open questions there that we can try to answer. And this has been one of the things that has been moving me since the time when this was published, which was 2005. And it's still something that it's in the back of most of the research that I do and most of the things that I will tell you today. So this is what I did was a method to find like hierarchical organizations in complex systems. And the thing is that if you look at the air transportation network and that blob before without knowing anything about geographical information, I developed this method that was able to like sort of like zoom in this sort of like Russian doll kind of fashion, right? So it would find like a large first level of groups, and then inside groups within groups within groups that were matching geographical location, different geographical units pretty nicely. So this was my first one success in my postdoc. And this was, I have to say, this was 2007, because it took me like a year and a half to be able to publish this, a year and a half. By sending it to different places, getting a reviewer who told me that this was not even wrong, in the sense that it was so bad, it wasn't even wrong. I mean, I don't think anybody can trump that as far as offensive comments go. But I mean, I still managed to, like, publish it in a very nice journal. I mean, I was super proud of this work because, I mean, I finally, I thought that I was at least getting my own success, even if it wasn't just this paper. And I was very proud of it. So I kept working on this. But there are things that I would like to stop here and tell you about. A couple of things. First, like, it's important to understand I got here because I didn't give up, right? If I had given up, none of that would have existed. But also that I remember at the time when I was getting very frustrated about not publishing papers in that RNA folding business, I decided to ask for help. I mean, it was very hard. I'm a very proud person, but I had to ask for help because, I mean, clearly I was not getting anywhere. So I told my advisor at the time, because I'm like, oh, this isn't working, I should do something else. And I said, and he said, I know, but I mean, I'll find something for you. And then I didn't want to work with Roger, and that, I mean, actually we complemented each other very well because we had different skills. So this happened and it was very nice. So I encourage you, like, ask for help, like rely on other people. It can be very beneficial for you in the long run to, like, see what other people are doing, where they can help you, I mean, what suggestions they have for you. It's always something that you should treasure when somebody wants to spend time talking to you and telling to you what directions are possible or encouraging you to do this or that. So yeah, it's not a failure. It's actually positive points for you to ask for help. Okay, now, another thing that I did, and this is what I said, like reviewers are mean, I kind of like couldn't understand why the scientific enterprise or social system worked the way it worked. So I started also becoming interested in another part of science, which was studying science itself, or what's called now science of science. You have to understand that at the time, this was maybe 2006 or something like this, there were very few people, but none in complex systems who were working on this, right? I mean, so, and Luis said, oh, he was obsessed, like the journal impact factor doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. And we started developing with a grad student a different system for journal rankings. This was systematically rejected by any journal out there because they said they were too crazy. Actually, we downloaded, we found this backdoor to the Web of Science, and we downloaded all the data. It wasn't allowed, but we could do it because at the time, their security settings were not as good as they are now, so we could do it. Actually, after publishing the paper, we were almost sued by the company But we managed to not get sued and actually strike a deal with them, so that they would give us, well, they gave Northwestern all their data, and in exchange for like first digs in any kind of metric that we developed. Okay, so this paper wasn't published in a super cool journal. Actually, only 1 or 2 years later after publishing this, then in top journals, they started publishing about science of science, but not until then. So we published it in PLOS One, and it had a super cool audience. Actually, in 2008, I became a research assistant professor at Northwestern. And as such, this is kind of it's journal faculty because you're paid by research projects, but I was allowed to ask for my own money. And I got my very first project from the National Science Foundation, precisely on science of science, and trying to predict the impact of publications based on like very early data. So here is my success, right? It was hard that, I mean, I was, at the time, I remember that Luis told me, you know what? I have applied multiple times to NSF and they have never given me any money. And you've gotten the first time. So there must be something that you've done well. And I was, very happy about this. So then moving forward, they gave me the project, and we have had more papers on this. And if you see the dates, I mean, this is, they don't appear. These are 2 papers that stemmed from that project, but these are from 2012, like the project I got in 2008, and 2016. So it has taken us ages to publish anything related. Why was that? Because the process of collecting data was very long. Now, there are many repositories that disambiguate authors that do things for you. We had to do everything by hand. So you can only imagine this was torture, but it was very satisfying torture, if I have to say, because we got very interesting results. Okay, cool. So going back, so that was my parenthesis on science of science, which unfortunately I have time to work on, but not as much as I would like. But going back to my main business and my networks, and trying to make sense of large data. And let me check the time. Okay, 10 more minutes. I'll try to go quick. So here I am, back to my big question is like, how am I going to make sense of data? This was already Roger and I thinking, what can we do? I mean, most of the time we think that data has no errors and we are not doing anything about it. Can we devise a method to sort of like find errors in our network data? So these are the questions that we ask ourselves. Can we models that can describe or predict and observe data? And what mathematical framework do I have to use to do this, right? That's where our questions, how am I going to do it? I don't even know where to start. Oh, so here it is. So that's when we sort of like, what about using this thing, this scary thing called probability theory, which I probably was avoiding like the plague. Like, I'm not understanding this. This looks like very tough, like, but well, maybe this is what we have to do, because I mean, I don't know any other way how people do it. And we started seeing papers like, oh, maybe this is what we should do. So actually we said, oh, let's use this thing that some social physicists doing social science have used, which are called stochastic block models. Maybe this can represent well networks. I mean, I don't know. I'm going to try. So, so we did it with success, I have to say. As a matter of fact, so it was 2009, we had accepted this paper in PNAS. That's the first time that we're using stochastic block models, for instance, for inference for link prediction in our area. And actually, the paper got accepted the day our first child was born. So it was funny. We were at the hospital and we are like, you're like, well, this lady here is in labor, whatever. And Virgili looks at the email and it's like, we got the paper accepted. So this must have been a good omen as any. And now having a child, well, this was tough. Actually, I have to say that summer before getting the paper accepted, I got a position. Actually, I got a tenure position where I'm now directly. So I didn't have to go to tenure track because I got a tenured one. And Roger also got a very nice position as well. So we were going back home. But before that, we managed to put in some time for work. Now, moving with a baby is something that you should not do under any circumstances. Like we did it, and it was probably the worst time of our lives. So no, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. I mean, having children is already a lot of work. Moving with a child is a nightmare. But well, there we were. I mean, so we moved. We're trying to find daycare. This was tough. But we were fortunate enough that the first year, and because we were a couple, we could sort of like split, you know, the time for working and for taking care of the child and write projects. We were successful with the projects. We got money from the US, we got money from Europe, and it was nice because we could start our own lab going. This has been a lot of work. I think many people sort of criticize it. It's like why do they work together? I mean, they should work on their own. Then the merits are never going to be one or the others. They are going to be together. But I don't know, each one does whatever they want. For me, it has worked very well. And I think also for Roger, in the sense that if you have small children, and probably here, I mean, according to statistics, are more of a benefit here, because most of the time women take care of the children and then their career stops and everything. But I had my partner was very sensitive to this, and he didn't want me to stop doing anything. So we shared, and that's what I would have liked anyway. So we shared responsibilities, and we shared also responsibilities in the lab. So the nice thing about sharing the lab was that when he wasn't there, I was there, or vice versa. So this means that students always got guidance. If we had visitors, they always had somebody who could be with them. Whatever it was, if we had a deadline, there was somebody who could be working on it, and which was, as I said, for us, it worked well. Even though of course, there is a price to pay, let's be honest, because it's, in some cases, I mean, I've been told, well, it has been suggested that I'm not doing anything and things like this, and that probably Roger is doing all the work, because why should it be the other way around? Like, I went to a conference and I remember I go with my badge, and there's this guy who's like, "Oh, who are you? What's your name?" And I said, "Oh, I'm Marta Sales Pardo." And he goes, "I thought you were a guy." And I'm like, "Oh, wow." I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. That was kind of like very odd. Well, anyway, it does work fine, right? I mean, in 2012, I had a second child to add on top of the first one, but we decided, well, it's now or never. If we want to, it has to happen now. But I was fortunate enough that I got this award from the Catalan government for me to spend less time teaching. Teaching is a killer. Teaching will take away so much time from you. But I got a little bit less of teaching, so I could, like, at least the little time I had for working, because young kids, even if you're sharing responsibilities, take a lot of your time and your energy, I could devote to research. So what did I do during this time? Okay. And I'm going to tell you like a short story about, you know, things that I've done. I've done many things, even though I haven't done as many things as you might think. Actually, we are not publishing a lot of papers, but each single one of the papers that we are publishing is super careful, and we've worked a lot for it. And this, I wouldn't have it any other way. We'll talk about this later. So I'm showing you this. So we were got interested in applying our network influence methods for predictions of interactions between drugs. So this is, the interactions between drugs can have negative and positive effects. Actually, so this plot on the left, right, shows you like the different behaviors that you can find. If you say you take two drugs at different levels of concentration, they can have different effects. So one is like additive, one plus the other, one or the other is the same, one is substituted to the other. It's antagonistic, meaning you have to take more to get the same effect. Or synergistic, with a small dose of the two, you get the same effect, right? And there's this other thing, which is suppression, which is interesting for fighting like antibiotic-resistant bacteria. I'm not going to go to that. But the thing, everybody was in the search for synergistic effects, right? We want to take lower doses of drugs, which potentially will be less harmful for our health in the long run. And for instance, in the case of cancer, right? Now the combinations of drugs in therapies has it's like the majority of treatments right now, because it's just way more effective. Okay, so we started, actually, so we developed methods for understanding, for predicting the effects of drugs, for understanding when two drugs would combine in a synergistic manner. And actually, we participated in a challenge. This is the AstraZeneca-Sangre drug combination prediction challenge. So the thing is that they were giving you data about the effects of combinations of drugs on different cancer models for cancer. We participated with our very naive, non-pharmaceutically informed model using network science alone, and we ranked among the top 20 teams worldwide, and we published a very nice paper. So I think this for us was a huge success, right? I mean, you use this very simple tool. I mean, and just having information about the interactions is super informative about what kind of interactions between drugs you are going to expect in a different tissue. So we could make predictions. I'm going a little bit faster here. So what's the lesson that I learned from this? This was a successful thing, right? Now, this paper I'm telling you about was in 2018. So it took me it took us from 2009 to 2018 to manage to get a working model for us to predict interactions between drugs and to be competitive with other more like pharmaceutical inspired models, right? Which actually are complementary, but I don't have time to talk about it. But so this has taken us a long time. It doesn't happen like tomorrow, right? When you want to do something, you don't even know how far it can take you. But it doesn't matter. Despite of how far it's going to take you, it's going to take time. If you want to do things well, it's going to take time, right? And it doesn't require lots of papers. It just requires you to be making like substantial steps each time and not making like mini steps that are repetition of what you do. Roger always tells me that I get bored very quickly. It's like I don't want to do the same thing twice because it's just like, right? Probably this is why I didn't like experiments, because I had to make it so many times that it was getting old very quickly. I like to like move forward, right? What this means, every time you move forward and you make something that it's substantially different from what you did before, it means that you will have to spend time on it. I mean, it's not for everyone, but for me, I think it has worked well. And also that science is a team effort. This is not something that I could have done by myself. This is something that I did with the collaboration of others. Not only the collaboration between Roger and myself, but grad students and postdocs who have spent a lot of time working on this. Okay, so now I'm here, like the very last thing. So I have like maybe 2 minutes. And I wanted to tell you just the very last success, but long story, okay? But it's going to be short, okay? So now, recently we've been working also on other things that, what if our data is not a network? So imagine like general data, not edges or things like this, but just like a regular function of y as a function of x, right? If I show you two possibilities of describing this data, like I show you like a line or this other bumpy thing here, and I ask you which one would you pick to describe your system, probably you would say this one, right? And why? Because it's simpler, right? I mean, probably it has more ability to extrapolate and predict new points, and the other one looks just over-specified. So what our dream was to develop some sort of like inference-based methodology that would automatically be able to retrieve models from data. So here we are. This is a fantastic illustration from Quantum Magazine about what we call a machine scientist. So an algorithm that takes data as input, has some sort of network inside, you crank it up, and it spits mathematical models, right? Inherently interpretable mathematical models for your data. So this is what we wanted to do, right? I'm not sure I even can play the video, but yeah. So this is our machine scientist in action, right? So this is this little algorithm that is going to take these points of different colors, and it's going to try to start generating different models, right? And trying to see how well they describe my data. So it samples the space of models. And here, these plots in here, they are showing you, so the quality, like the energy This is called the description length, and I'm going to go into it. But the energy related to these models, the lower the energy, the better the model. And here the error, right? So what we find is that for this simple case of the data, machine science is able to find the good model. We've been able to use it for many different things. Why this was a success, I'm going to go to this later. We have not been the first ones to do this. These other people have developed machine sciences, but so far, ours is the one that performs the best because of some ideas that we managed to make a reality using inference. But I mean, if anybody's interested in it, in this piece that came out in Quantum Magazine about a year and a half ago, something like this, there is a summary of what other people have been doing, and I think it's great for you to get an idea of maybe things that you could do in the future. So how long did it take us to get here? And so the paper was published in 2020. You know, the first time I heard about machine science in my life, it was in 2009. It was the year of my first publication in inference and of my first child, and the first time I saw machine sciences. And I was amazed. It was this paper in Science, and I was just like, wow, how can it be? How can these people do it? How can they generate models that find conservation laws of the double pendulum? Crazy, completely crazy. But see, 11 years later, we managed to have our own. We didn't spend 11 years doing it, but we spent at least 8. We asked for money multiple times. I think at least 10 different people worked on this project. It took forever, but with a super good result. I mean, we had students that needed to graduate, so we couldn't spend enough time on it. So we were just putting time here and there, and other people who decided to also believe in the project. And finally it became a reality. And I think this is, you cannot see it because I mean, these images are like, wait, I'm almost done. It's here, like, I don't know if you can see the whole screen, but yeah, so fortunately for me, right? My career has advanced well, despite like setbacks and failures and fighting, right? I've been lucky enough to get yet again another award from the Catalan government. I became a full professor. I also became a fellow of the Network Science Society. I really consider myself a very lucky person. But I also think I really had to work for it. It was, and everybody, right, has to work for their luck. And I feel, as I say, very fortunate to be able to explain this to you today. And maybe to have a nice conversation now that my talk is finally open. So thank you. Did I stop sharing?